Their fragrance drifted through the air on warm evenings, attracting butterflies and hummingbirds. It wasn't clutter or chaos, it was beauty. Yet to the board that enforced rigid uniformity, those flowers represented rebellion. The letter was the first strike. It carried a deadline. Remove the plants in 2 weeks or face fines of $50 a day. On its own, it could have been dismissed as a mistake. But behind it was a clear message that individuality was not welcome. Every lawn in the neighborhood was expected to look the same, from the height of the grass to the position of the trees. The garden broke that illusion of control, and that was something the board, and especially its loudest enforcer, could not tolerate. At first there was disbelief, then anger. Why should flowers be a problem? They harmed no one, blocked no one, and made the street brighter. But as frustration grew, so too did defiance. Rather than back down, the decision was made to fight back in a way the board could never anticipate. If they wanted the garden gone, they would instead be given something far bigger, something louder, something that would make it impossible to ignore. A quiet act of resistance began to take shape. The notice that demanded removal became a challenge. It was taped to the refrigerator, not as a threat, but as a reminder. 2 weeks remained, not to destroy, but to transform. That night, a plan was born. The garden would not shrink, it would grow. It would not be erased, it would explode into something extraordinary. If they wanted conformity, they would instead be confronted with a jungle. And so the first chapter closed with a single decision that would ignite a battle between control and creativity. The following week was a blur of preparation. Trips to nurseries and garden centers filled the days. Trucks arrived with soil, gravel, bamboo fencing, and pots overflowing with tropical greenery. Neighbors peeked from their blinds, whispering among themselves. Some were curious, others suspicious, but the board's patrol cars drove by slowly, their glares lingering, sensing something was happening. Work began quietly. Grass was stripped away, replaced with stone pathways that twisted and curved like trails through a forest. Raised beds were built, each one holding palms, ferns, and orchids. A small pond was dug into the center of the yard, its surface lined with smooth rocks and filled with koi that flashed like living jewels beneath the water. Solar lanterns were placed along the paths, glowing softly at night, making the space shimmer in the darkness. Each day the deadline crept closer. Each night the garden grew more alive. The backyard transformed into something unrecognizable, not just a yard, but an ecosystem. Vines stretched toward the sky, butterflies fluttered between blossoms, and the air carried the scent of jasmine and lilies. What began as a few flower beds had become a sanctuary. By the time the board arrived for their inspection, clipboards in hand, the jungle was complete. They had expected compliance or failure. Instead, they found themselves standing before a towering wall of bamboo, tropical blooms bursting in every direction, and a pond alive with movement. It was breathtaking, intentional, and designed with care. But beauty was not enough for them. They left quickly, muttering about violations, and within hours another letter arrived, harsher than before. All non-approved landscaping was to be removed within 48 hours, or fines would begin immediately. Rather than panic, a new strategy emerged. Cameras were set up, photos taken, and videos recorded of the vibrant jungle. That evening, a short clip was uploaded online, showcasing the lush paradise the board wanted destroyed. Within weeks, the garden became more than a private rebellion. It was a landmark. Cars slowed down to catch glimpses of the lush backyard. Strangers left notes of admiration at the door. Neighbors, once silent, began speaking of how refreshing it was to see color, life, and individuality instead of endless rows of sameness. The board, desperate to reassert power, doubled down. Letters turned to fines, fines to threats of legal action. But each move only fueled the fire. News outlets picked up the story, dubbing it the Backyard Jungle Battle. Cameras arrived, reporters filmed, and the images of towering palms and glowing lanterns filled television screens. What was meant to be erased had instead become the pride of the community. Support rallied. A petition spread online demanding the board drop its fines. Tens of thousands signed in days. Comment sections overflowed with outrage at the board's rigidity and admiration for the courage to stand up against it. The garden was no longer just a yard, it was a movement. When the vote came, the result was decisive. The fines were cancelled. The demand for removal was rescinded. Guidelines were quietly rewritten, granting homeowners more freedom to design their spaces so long as they were safe and maintained. The victory was more than personal. It was cultural. The backyard jungle remained, thriving as a sanctuary of color and life. Neighbors followed the example, planting their own flowers, adding splashes of personality to their homes. What began as a single fight against conformity reshaped the entire neighborhood. The board had tried to erase individuality. Instead, they had created a monument to it. The garden stood, not as a violation, but as a symbol of defiance and creativity. And so the jungle lived on, a reminder that sometimes beauty blooms brightest in the face of control.